Okay, we're recording. So welcome, I'm Edwin Rutch, Director of the Center for Building a Culture of Empathy, and this is our Empathy Cafe, which is hosted by the Empathy Tent. And our goal here, our intention is to bridge political and social divides and build a culture of empathy. And for anyone watching this, you're invited to take part in one of these empathy circles, and you can find out more about it at the cultureofempathy.com, or actually empathycircle.com is probably the best place to go. And so we're starting to scale up these empathy circles where we have an empathy circle training that we are doing, and we invite you to take part in those, as well as these circles to cross the political divide. And to get started, we're just going to go around and share our name, where we're from, and maybe our political leanings, and I'll demonstrate that. I'm in the Berkeley, California area, which is San Francisco Bay Area, and politically, I grew up on the right, moved to the left, and now I moved to the empathic side. So, Bill, you want to?
Sure. My name is Bill Filler. I'm a retired special education teacher. And as I say, I'm on the left, but it's complicated.
Okay. And it's, how do you, Yati, how are you?
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, so.
Yeah, I'm probably, my name's Jyoti, and I'm living in the Seattle area, and I'm probably a left-leaning person, and looking at, like, how is it that the left is really not what I thought it was.
Okay, Carolina?
Hi, my name is Carolina. I'm from Poland, Central Europe. Well, I need to mention that my language skills are not perfect. I'm far from good in speaking English, so I ask you to be helpful or merciful to me when I try to understand you. My political view is radical left. So I'm afraid, again, there is no right wing in our circle, really. Yeah. Right wing. I'm radical left, but with I do what I describe Gandhian methods. That's very important to me. I think those Gandhian methods are it's a key of the achieving anything. So radical left with Gandhian means.
Okay, well, thanks for joining us from Poland, and I'm so glad that you are joining us at this later time for you. And so just to go over how we do the empathy circle, everyone here is familiar with it. I'll just recount very quickly. Using the empathy circle process, one person will speak, they will select who they speak to, and then we'll talk about the topic at hand or whatever is alive for you, anything that you really want to talk about. The person who's listening will reflect back their understanding of what you're saying till you feel heard to your satisfaction. And as a speaker, you want to pause periodically to let the person reflect back. And we're going to have, 5-minute turns. Would you be willing to take time, Bill? Keep
Sure.
Time for 5-minute turns. And then once you feel heard or the time is up, it's the listener's turn to select someone who will go around for the next almost 2 hours. So our topic is on criminal justice reform and reducing mass incarceration. And the reason we have that topic is that there's an organization called Cut 50, and it's an organization that's trying to reduce mass incarceration in the United States, which has some of the highest incarceration rates in the world. And they have a day of empathy on March 5th. So they have organizations from all around the country. On March 5th, they will go to their state legislators and talk to their legislators. And they have signs that say Day of Empathy. And we're kind of working with them, and they're kind of gearing up to hold some of these empathy circles with that group. So I thought it'd be good to talk about, mass incarceration sort of related to that. And hopefully in future circles, we'll have that community take part in these. We're just kind of gearing up now to have them take part. So with that, we can just get started, and whoever would like to speak and can select someone to speak to, and we can get started. And Caroline, if you have trouble with, with the audio breaking up, you can always just turn off the video, and that might help with the bandwidth if it's needed. So,
thank you. I just changed my connection to the mobile data connection, so
okay.
I suppose it will be better.
Yeah, it looks pretty good now.
You.
So, would you like to start, or you?
Well, I need a little bit warm up, so
okay.
I prefer to
okay, well, I'll start then. I guess I'll speak to Bill.
Okay, I'm listening.
Yeah, so what's up? I've been joining that organization, the Day of Empathy. They have these organizing calls, and I've been joining them, and there's maybe about 15, 20 people on the call. And so it's just been real interesting to kind of try to connect with that organization.
Okay. So in preparation for the Day of Empathy, you've been joining online with the group, Cut 50, and kind of seeing and talking to them and getting kind of a lay of the land.
And they sent out their email list. They have like about 60 organizations on their email list around the country. So they gave us, they shared that email list. So I want to send an email to all those people and invite them, all those organizations, invite them into the empathy circles. So I'm hoping we can kind of scale up empathy circles around this topic. So.
Okay. So your contact with them was fruitful. They gave you some email lists of 60 groups around, that are interested in this. And so that you'd like to reach out to them and ask them to participate in empathy circles.
Yeah. So, and then on March 5th, a group of us, I think you included, will be going to Sacramento for the Day of Empathy to talk with state legislators as well. So I'm kind of excited about that. It's a good way for us to connect with other organizations and get connected with the politicians as well.
So through this collaboration with Cut 50, where the Empathy Tent is going, including me, are going to the state capitol on March 5th to try to connect with legislators and also other fellow empathizers or would-be empathizers.
Yeah. And finally, I'm a little concerned about the turnout. Like, we have 225 people in our Facebook group, and only a handful are turning up, and I'm not quite sure what's going on there. It's I did talk to some organizations that are interested in environmental, and I told them about what we're doing. They said, "Oh, our group is not interested in this topic." So it seems that this incarceration topic is perhaps not. It's not, so people don't have a wide interest in it, and I have some concerns about just not more people turning up.
Okay. So even though you have 220 people, signed up for on Facebook, a few are coming, and you are considering whether it's due to the subject matter. You reached out to an environmental group, and they said, "Well, we're not interested in this."
Yeah.
And so you're kind of playing around with this, subjects that would get people to participate.
Right. Yeah. I feel heard. Thank you.
Okay. All right. Jyoti?
Hello.
Hi, how are you?
Good.
Would you listen to me, please?
I will.
Thank you. Okay. Okay, so when Carolina talked, she spoke about Gandhian methods, and I'm a big fan of that because being a special education teacher, you are not going to beat enlightenment into anyone. Go ahead, I'll stop there.
So I hear when Carolina spoke, something in you lit up because you have a connection already and some past experience with the Gandhian method, and you hold dear to your heart the premise that you're not going to beat anybody into enlightenment.
Yes, not only in my heart, but I've actually seen the evidence.
So you have clear experience with the power of this.
Oh, yes, because these are assaultive students that I dealt with. And so, so therefore, physical, assaults and things like that were quite common. And so therefore, if you try to just simply handle it physically, you will last about 3 days in my job. But if you can set physical limits, give them a sense of safety, and then engage them, you can change the world.
So the kids that you were working with were kids who had past traumatic histories, and you found that if you could set up safety and a sense of trust and boundaries, that after a few days you could move forward with applying the Gandhian methods.
Right. In other words, on one sense, it was setting limits, and in the other sense, it was engagement.
Engagement, yeah.
Yes, you're engaging with the students, making them feel that they're important, listening to their opinions, and then within the structure, creating a way forward. I'll stop there.
Okay, so the key was setting limits and then also creating engagement, listening to them, helping them feel important and engaged, seen, I would imagine.
Mm-hmm. Yes. And a lot of our students, it's hard for me to come up with, I was a special education teacher for 37 years. And I'd say that conservatively speaking, just in the sense of incidences where we had to call the police, those students were back in class or in our program the next day, within the next day to a week.
So you were doing special ed work for 37 years, and you observed that in the cases where you had to call the police, that the kids were back in your class within a day.
Yeah, generally speaking. And that's why I'm involved in this work, because I believe that people so desperately want to be heard.
So that's what brings you to this work, is that you have a direct experience with how vital and desperately people need to be heard.
Thank you, Jyoti. I feel completely heard. Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
I'll just interject real quick. Ben has joined us. I'm putting instructions how to do the empathy circle into the chat, Ben, and you can also observe for a little while. You'll get a sense of how the empathic listening process works. Are you hearing us, Ben? Well, maybe audio's not working. Okay, Jyoti, go ahead.
So when I'll talk to Carolina.
Okay, I'm listening.
So when Edwin started talking about the Cut 50, I really perked up, because I've done some volunteer work in the prison up here at the Monroe prison, which was one of the first places that NBC was brought into the prison. So, go ahead.
Can I interrupt?
Mhm.
So you get interested in the topic of today's call when you learn that Edwin have proposed the topic of Cut 50 because you were involved in some activity in prisons where you lived, in the place where you live, and you also mentioned that the concept of nonviolent communication was brought to this prison system where you try to perform some actions.
Yes, we brought nonviolent communication, which is basically an empathy process, to the prison, and I learned a lot there. I was very impressed with the impact that we were able to make, and so I didn't.
May I reflect?
Mhm.
So you were engaged in some actions involving nonviolent communication. What you perceive as empathy communication, as I understand,
Mhm.
and you were surprised how effective it was.
Yeah, I was very. Mhm. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
surprised and inspired by it. Mhm.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I forgotten to say. You were inspired by that. Yeah.
Right, right. So, so when I heard about Cut 50 from Edwin, I hadn't heard of it before. So I was like, oh, wow, this is good to know. And I'm thinking I'm going to look into what might be happening up here with that group.
Okay. Okay, but you say that you never hear before about this movement Cut 50,
Mhm.
and first time you hear about it from Edwin, and you are interested. What is it you want to see? Look at the, I suppose, website or something, and learn more about it.
Right. Yeah, I just wanted to see what kind of things they're organizing up here and see if it might be something I would have time and energy for.
Okay, so you want to look at that to see if you if there is any field you can engage in.
Yes.
Is it correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Uh-huh. And the empathy circles that Edwin has been joining with online might be something I could look at, and a way to find out more about them also.
I'm not sure if I understand you correctly, but you think that the concept of empathy circle that Edwin develops might be also kind of executed in this process of activity in prisons.
Okay, I wasn't real clear, so I'll say that again. So Edwin explained that he's been joining the Day of Empathy online empathy circles they're holding, and so I thought, well, maybe I could go there and check that out as a way to find out more also.
But you mean those empathy circle or empathy circle somewhere in prison?
Online, the Cut 50 people, what I'm understanding from
Okay.
what Edwin said, he's been going there and joining their empathy groups. So I thought I'd also take a look at that.
So you say that that Edwin is engaged in some empathy circle within this movement Cut 50, and you want to join this empathy circle also. You also want to join this
Yeah,
empathy circle.
I'd like to just look at what they're doing and see if it's something that I might have time for or be interested in.
So you as you said earlier, you want to see how it works, what is it, and if you want to join and make some actions as well.
Yeah, I want to just check it out.
Okay, I understand you want to check it out. Yeah.
So that was the time.
Okay.
Okay. So I suppose it's my turn.
Yep.
I don't know if Ben.
Do you want to speak to? You could speak to me, and then I'll speak to Ben.
Okay.
It might be
Okay.
easier that way.
Okay, Edwin, I would try to. Well, okay, I will try. So I choose you, Edwin.
Okay.
Well, I don't know much about this movement, and I read your post on Facebook about Cut 50. I don't know much about it. I just learn about it. I don't know what is it, how it works. I just have this reflection that it's not, it shouldn't be, well, in our term of empathy, it shouldn't be a day of empathy, but day of sympathy, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so you don't know a lot about what this Cut 50 is, but it seems like they might be using, not using the word empathy correctly. Really, it should be called a day of sympathy, not a day of empathy.
Well, I wouldn't say that they use incorrectly the term empathy, because there is, I don't know, 200 of definitions of empathy. I would say that in our terms, or your terms, your meaning of empathy, they should rather use the word sympathy. That's what I think.
Mm-hmm. So you think they should really, in the way that we're using the word,
Yeah.
that they should probably use the word sympathy instead. It would be more accurate, yeah.
Yeah, from our point of view.
Mm-hmm.
I see in the whole problem of justice system, imprisonment, the prison system, which are completely different in your country, in the United States, and in Poland. But there are kind of general problems around the world, I think. And first thing is general sense of justice, ethics, morality. I have a lot of doubts about it. This is one level, kind of personal, but also social, because ethics is something that is very social. This is first level. I stop there.
Okay, so there's sort of, you have some views about the justice system, and you have different sort of levels, and at one level you have a real, you kind of question the whole process, or so you have some concerns about the process.
Yeah, about how we understand something as fair, just, legal, or moral. Okay.
So what does even justice, morality, legality even mean? Kind of, what does that even mean?
And I hope we have more than one round, so I will have time to explain that more. Another level is kind of typical rule of justice system or prison system, that imprisoning is kind of eliminating people from the society. It's kind of outcasting them and putting them together in one place. People who commit crime, homicide, whatever, we put them all together out of the society. This is kind of typical feature of our justice system.
Mm-hmm. So you're just saying that the justice system is structured in a way that anyone who's committed a crime, they're all put together outside of the society. And it sounds like you have concerns about that.
Yeah, they are just eliminated from our society. This is
So
kind of,
just outcast, eliminated, yeah, just
yeah.
thrown out in a sense.
And I think that opposite and we should think about it, what we create when we put all those people, usually very violent, okay, I see time, in one place. It also creates something, and we don't talk about it
Yeah.
much.
It's
So
like,
this is another level.
oh yeah, so another level is that everyone is they're put out into this, they're cast out, but we're creating something too. And what we're creating, we're not really talking about what it is that we are creating with that.
Yeah.
And it sounds like you feel we should talk about it more.
Yeah. And another thing I'm wrapping up is the restorative circle, restorative practice, something that the guy who, the activist, he actually is French, but he works in Brazil. I've forgotten his name.
Dominic Barter.
Yeah, the one. Yeah. This kind of practice, restorative practice, is another thing we should talk about it. Yeah.
Yeah, so as an alternative to this outcast, it's the restorative practice, you know, that like Dominic Barter in Brazil does.
Yeah. Thank you. I feel fully heard.
Great. Ben, how's your audio? Are you hearing us?
Hi.
Oh, great.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
So do you have a sense I'll speak to you and you reflect back your understanding of what I say?
Yes, I kind of read over the guide.
Okay.
So I'm your active listener?
Yeah, you're the listener. I'll speak to you.
Okay.
Yeah, let me think. I totally agree with Carolina about we need a new justice system that's more of a really, I would call it a restorative empathy circle, a restorative empathy system. So instead of justice, I think it's really, we need an empathic society, and then if there's a harm or crime or something, that we restore an empathic connection. So I would kind of rename it.
Yeah. Yeah. I live in Berkeley, and I've talked with some homeless people in people's.
No, all you do is just reflect back what I'm saying.
Oh.
Just what I'm saying. You'll get a chance to speak after. Just what did you hear me say?
Right. Okay. Yeah. Sorry. Please continue.
Yeah, I was saying that I agree with Carolina that we need we need a different system for, instead of justice, that we need a restorative empathy system.
Okay. Yes, we really do need more empathizing activities. I agree.
So, yeah, then let's see, there was something that Jyoti said that I wanted to respond to that, oh, I didn't have empathy circles with Cut 50, that they just have organizing meetings. And so they're not doing empathy circles.
So you feel that organizing meetings, they don't exactly make people empathize with each other?
There's an organization called Cut 50 that they're not using empathy circles.
I see.
So if you just say there, yeah, just reflect back what I was saying. I think that was all. I'll kind of.
Okay. I'm sorry, I'm kind of new to this. So
Yeah. Okay. Well. Okay. I'll do it again. Yes, that's fine. So
I'm afraid Ben. I'm sorry. I'm afraid Ben doesn't know the rules. Probably we should explain that.
Yeah. Yeah. All you're doing is reflecting back what I say. Just what did you hear me say? It's like you don't add your own ideas or anything. You just share back what it is that you hear me say.
Oh, okay.
So and then once I'm done, totally finished, then it'll be your turn to share whatever you want. So it takes a little bit of practice. So let's see. I'll try to say something similar. Simple or yeah. So So yeah, I'm working. What I want to do is there's an organization called Cut 50, and I would like to invite them to take part in empathy circles.
Okay. Yes, it'd be great to invite them to join the empathy circle with us.
Yeah, and there's a list of about 60 emails that they have. So I'm going to send out an invitation to them and say, hey, come join us in an empathy circle to talk about reducing mass incarceration.
Yeah, their input into this subject with us would be really great.
Yeah, for them to take part in empathy circles would be really great.
Yes.
So if you just repeat back what you heard me say.
Okay. For them to like participate in the empathy circle, that would be a really great thing.
Yeah, exactly. Thank you. So other than that, we're going March 5th. We'll go to Sacramento and try to join a whole group there that's going to talk to it's our state capital. They're going to go talk to the state legislators, and we're going to join them too.
Yeah, it'd be great to come out and actually meet with the state legislators.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I feel fully heard. So now you can select who you would like to speak to and share whatever you would like, and they will reflect back what you say. And you can see the names are under each person. So.
Okay. So like I'm new and I only know Mr. Rush. So is it okay if I?
Okay, you want to speak back to me? Sure. Okay. So what I'm hearing is you're new, and you only know me, so you want to speak to me.
Yes. I'm not exactly into like incarceration stuff because I'm still in school. But I really believe in the power of empathy, and I thought I could reach out to people who practice it.
So you're still in school, and you're not that familiar with the incarceration topic, but you really believe in empathy, and you're wanting to reach out to people who are interested in empathy or believe in it.
Okay. Yes. So I don't know if I can contribute much, but I've talked with some homeless people in Berkeley, and they often talk about how there's not help at all in the community for people like them.
Okay, so what I'm hearing is you were in Berkeley and that you go to the homeless and you talk to the homeless, and they are saying that there's not help for them.
Okay. Yes. So like I feel like people are not seeing things from their perspective and feeling things from how they would feel, and that would just leads to something like fear of the unknown, and people don't approach to help them.
Okay, so it's your observation that people have a fear of the unknown, which is and the homelessness is sort of unknown, and it creates a sense of fear. And because they have that sense of fear, they're not reaching out to help them.
Yes, a lot of them are drug addicts, previously incarcerated. Some of them don't have documents, so it's very hard for them to actually get back into a system that does not actively empathize with them.
Okay, so you're pointing out the difficulty for them to get back into the system because the people in the system aren't empathizing with them, and they have issues like drug addiction, perhaps are undocumented, and just have other reasons that they have difficulty getting back into the social system.
Yes. So I guess I'd like to wrap it up with thanking you for like showing me how this thing works. That this reflecting is great. I really do feel like I'm being empathized with. So thank you. So.
Okay, so I'm hearing some gratitude from you that we're showing you how this empathic listening works, and you're kind of just grateful for just learning how this works.
Yes. So I suppose I will now give it back to you.
Okay, you feel fully heard. You can just say, I feel fully heard, and that means it's my turn. And I'll speak to Bill then.
Okay.
Yeah, I hope you will come to, oh, you're going to Day of Empathy with us. So there's two of us going. So I'm kind of excited about that.
So you're excited about us going to the Day of Empathy.
And it's a lot of kind of organizing. All this stuff takes a lot of organizing. Like you got to connect with people, you got to schedule stuff, you got to kind of negotiate with them. It's a lot of work. it's a lot of work.
So there's a lot of preparation work and the work that goes behind it.
Yeah, and I really, what Carolina is saying about the Sympathy Day, in a sense, it is a little bit like sympathy. They are trying to elicit, share their stories, and then from the legislators get, some sympathy and care, and then they're trying to get some legislation passed. So that's sort of the process they're doing.
Mm-hmm. So you can see Carolina's point about sympathy because they're trying to get them some different legislation and some help.
And yeah, and I do want to try to turn it into an empathy circle practice, so it's mutual empathy. So with the organizers that are organizing the Sacramento event, I want to see if when they go talk to the state legislatures, if they will ask the legislators to do empathy circles with us, to maybe do some recorded online or in-person empathy circles. So I do want to bring the empathy, the more mutual empathy process in there.
So at the Day of Empathy, the Cut 50 Day of Empathy, you want to bring the practice of empathy circles and see if the legislatures and other people from the Cut 50 group will participate in empathy.
Yeah. So but it takes a lot of talking, a lot of negotiating, a lot of organizing. It's a lot of work. It's very time consuming.
So I'm feeling you're somewhat overwhelmed because that's the kind of work that goes into it.
Yeah.
Every time it's somewhat daunting.
Yeah. It's not quite daunting. It's a lot, but it's not daunting. Would be kind of like too hard, but it's doable. But it just takes a lot.
Right. So not daunting as in off-putting, but it does take a lot of work.
Yeah, I feel heard. Thank you. Fully heard.
Okay, sure. All right. Carolina?
Okay, I'm listening.
Okay.
Again, be merciful, please.
Okay. Well, I'll start. First of all, I have to say about people who come internationally. It's been well established that learning a language is the most difficult intellectual thing you can do. So I speak one language, and sometimes not that well. First of all, I want to express my joy and wonder and appreciation of people coming from all over the world. Okay, I'll stop there.
You are very. So you want to express your appreciation and kind of joy and pleasure to see and talk to people who are from different countries. Mm-hmm. And you express that you say that you admire the fact that some people speak more than one language and you just speak one language. I know that it's breaking the rules, but actually I just want to say that Wittgenstein said that language, the limit of our culture is our language. So yeah, I'm sorry for crossword.
Okay, all right. Well, I'm a teacher, so then I'll come to your house and turn the lights off till you calm down and make a better decision.
Okay.
So, So, and I guess my experience is really what will change it is the practice of empathy circles and the developing of those skills. And I'll stop there.
So you say what I hear is that that talking, dialogue, and empathy circle is and practicing
Mm-hmm.
is a kind of step to changing this situation.
Yes, actually. There are a lot of people who have degrees and who say that they're good listeners, and I have no reason to think otherwise. But it is actually the doing and the practicing that will actually, I believe, change the world.
So you say that that you observe that many people who have higher education don't really have this ability, the skill of listening to others.
Mm-hmm. Well, they might have the skill, but they don't always practice it.
I'm sorry, they don't know what?
No, they know how, but they
Okay.
don't practice it.
Okay, so you say what I hear is that you're saying that people sometimes very well educated and with a broad knowledge of speaking, talking, listening don't really practice what we call empathy dialogue.
Right.
Is it correct?
Yes, yes. And in my experience, being a special education teacher, I had to do a lot of listening. But I find that by participating in the circles, it keeps my skills up.
Okay, so you're saying that you have a lot of opportunities to practice listening. It's kind of your job to listen to others because you work in as a teacher or in special education, and this is your specialty to listen to others. But you observe that practicing is a key is a key because when you practice you still kind of keep the level of some skills of yours.
Yes, exactly. Keeping the skills up. Thank you, Caroline. I feel fully heard.
Okay, thank you. So well, I tried well, maybe I choose I'm sorry if I pronounce your name wrongly. Paramiyoti.
Yeah, that's good.
Paramiyoti. Okay, I'm choosing you to talk to you. Well, this time I want to say something about our sense of justice and morality. Obviously, we have some ethical rules derived from the religion mostly.
Okay, let me this part. So you want to comment on morality and justice, and you're starting off by going to make comment on how religion is a part of that.
Well, not exactly religion. I just mean that we have kind of strange understanding of morality and justice.
So you're observing that there's a very strange concept of morality and judgment that we have.
Yeah, for example, we obviously perceive person who steals the wallet as a person who should be punished, but we accept stealing money from us, so to speak, for example, on Wall Street. We perceive it as a legal form and just form. Yeah, I'll stop there.
So you're observing that the small person who does small crimes
Yeah.
Is punished, and then the people who are in high places do large crimes and suffer no consequences?
Yeah. And actually, making big crimes, stealing big money, and making even mass murder very often not face does not face the any justice. And actually, the whole legal system is created to support such form of crime and injustice. Okay.
So you're looking at how the whole system is designed to actually create injustice, where people in high places can do mass murder and steal large amounts of money, and nothing comes to them as a consequence.
Yes, more specifically, I let's mention about the whole international injustice, economic injustice, when Western country simply exploit so-called third world countries, and they are supported by international law, by IMF, very often World Bank, financing this international form of exploitation. And this, well, I stopped there.
Mm-hmm. So you're observing how Western countries seem to be backed by the IMF, the World Bank, and perpetuate crime all over the world.
Yeah, nobody, well, the whole colonization was one big crime, and nobody never was held to account for that.
So you're talking about how colonization was just a huge world crime, and with never, not a word about its criminality.
Okay, and the international company use those big international institutions to create even private wars somewhere in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America. It happens over around the world, and it's legal.
So
Everything is okay.
Yeah, international companies are creating wars all over the world, and it's legal.
Okay, so in consequence, we have, I'm wrapping up, I see the time. So in consequence, we have Caravana people who are accused about people who will create a crime society in America, and we have boat people on the Mediterranean Sea and south borders of Europe, and we accuse them about those who are terrorists and crime makers, let's say, but we don't see that we actually create the situation for crime, and we are responsible for crime.
So you're observing people from the Mediterranean and how they come.
Caravana people on your borders and boat peoples who try to get to Europe, okay?
So people who try to come to Europe are coming, and people complain about the crime that they bring, but they don't look at the crime that was created by Western civilization to push them into there.
Yeah, I actually don't believe that all of them are people who commit crimes, okay? But that's how they are shown to us. Okay?
Yeah, they're being used as, they're being talked about as like a scapegoat, and they're being blamed for a lot of crime.
Yeah, thank you. I feel heard.
Okay, I think Ben was saying you need to leave, or
yes. So I would like to apologize to everyone, but thank you, Carolina. It was a pleasure to listening to you. but I need to go.
Okay, I hope you come back next time, Ben.
Okay, yes, I will.
And feel free to contact me if you want to talk about empathy and stuff in Berkeley.
Okay.
Okay, Jati, it's up to you. I think he's on. So it's your turn.
Yeah, I feel grateful that, let's see, who am I going to talk to? I guess I'll just talk to Carolina back because you're sharing what you've outlined and talked about. I feel grateful to hear and to listen to the thoughts that express my observations as well. So it's nice to hear someone articulate things that I observe.
So what I hear you say that you feel grateful for hearing what I just said, and you feel grateful for hearing things that you observe by yourself in the world.
Yeah, I feel grateful that you're expressing in words and ideas things that I observe in the world.
Yeah, so you feel grateful that I articulate the things that you observe.
Yeah, it's almost like it's refreshing to hear someone say the emperor has no clothes.
Okay, so I didn't understand the last expression. You said something about emperors, but I suppose it's something negative about emperors.
It's a saying that the emperor has no clothes on, and someone points it out.
Okay, I have to learn this expression. I'm sorry, this is difficult to me. Okay, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's a cultural, I think, understanding. It goes back to a story where a child sees the emperor parading amongst the people with no clothes on, but nobody says anything. And the child says, the emperor has no clothes. So
okay, now I understand the word. I thought you mean about wearing, about clothes. Okay, yeah. So you're saying that it is important to articulate, to express that empire doesn't have clothes on him, doesn't have clothes put on. Yeah.
To say the truth, just to speak truth.
Yeah, yeah. So in other words, it's important to say the truth.
Yes, it is, and it's a bit confusing to look at the depth, the amount of silence there is around this topic.
So you're saying that for you it's hard to live with the silence around the topic.
Not just to live with it, but that it exists, that there is so much distraction and looking away and not bringing focus and a weight of attention to this topic.
Okay, so what I hear you say that it's not just silence around the topic, but kind of covering and taking eyes from it, looking somewhere, looking aside, trying to to cover the topic or to hide the problem, and you perceive it, you kind of dislike that.
Yeah, I'm very grateful that you're bringing it to us, bringing it up, and it just feels very satisfying to talk about things that are real and that are so often taboo, off limits.
So you are grateful for bringing this perspective to kind of bringing it to our talk, and uh, uh, well, I'm not sure what you just said.
Yeah.
Kind of. Can you repeat the last
Sure.
sentence?
Yeah, it's just refreshing.
Okay. So it's good to listen to about it and kind of refreshing the such a perspective on the topic.
Right.
That's what you mean?
Yeah. So yeah, it's good to it's just refreshing to me to be in a space where true, the transparency is not just allowed but explored.
So you are grateful for being in a place when transparency and talking aloud about the topic, that the situation is kind of developed and open to us. Okay, that's how I understand.
Uh-huh.
What
Okay.
Hmm?
Is my time up?
Okay, so now it's my turn. So maybe I will choose Bill, or whom I should choose, or Edwin. I'm not sure whom I should to choose
It's
to
your
close the
choice.
circle. Okay, Bill.
Okay.
So I said a little bit about this phenomenon of very strange understanding of justice and morality. What is moral? What is not? And I just want to add to that actually ancient Greek, one of the ancient Greek philosophers, I don't remember his name right now, it just came to my mind, that he said that market is a place where people legally steal from each other. It was about agora, so it could be also about politics. Okay, I stopped there.
Okay, so in talking about this idea about labeling what's a crime and what's not, you were thinking about and reflecting on this Greek philosopher, you couldn't remember his name, where he said the marketplace is a place where crime or stealing is legalized. And so,
Yeah.
but in the sense, the agora, or the ancient Greek marketplace, could also as a place for politics. So you're also identifying that to politics as well, rather than just buying and selling things.
Yeah, so when we think about success in our civilization, economical success, we can describe it as a situation when you put into market less than you take from it. What is it if it's not a stealing?
Okay.
It is kind of legal stealing, okay?
Okay. So you're saying that in essentially, if you kind of eliminate the labels and then you take more from a market than you put in, you're essentially stealing in some way.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I'm a little bit disturbed by something at my home. I have to focus again. So, yeah, and it works on many levels, okay? And now I want to say something more about this putting together people who commit crime, any form of crime. We put them together in one place and we create a kind of subculture that exists in prisons.
Okay. So when we put people who commit crimes together, we essentially are putting them together and they create their own subculture in prisons.
Yeah, so we have this level of strange understanding of morality and justice, and then we create another kind of small communities that are managed by their own rules.
Okay. So basically using kind of like what you would consider kind of a off-balance sense of justice, people are put in jails either justly or unjustly, and then they are essentially living in their own culture there, where they're making their own rules.
Yeah, and it's quite obvious probably to all of us that this is the place of a huge violence.
So right, and when that happens, there's a lot of violence.
Yeah, and mostly when we are in a just general society, the violence is kind of melted in the whole society, and suddenly we concentrate this violent phenomenon in one place, in small, well, more or less small group of people.
Okay. So in the general society, the violence is sort of kind of spread out and within the, kind of woven into the culture. But then we take these, people who have committed these acts and we concentrate them into this small place where I would say that things heat up and get worse. That's my interpretation of what you're saying. Sorry.
Yeah. I feel fully heard and turn to you.
Okay.
I pass.
Sure. Okay. All right. I'll talk to Edwin.
Okay, listening.
Well, I kind of riff on what Carolina said, and because in a special ed class, that's what you're doing. Actually, you're taking people or students who have various really serious problems, and you're concentrating them in one place, which can make for quite a challenging situation. I'll stop there.
So you're sort of building on what Carolina is saying about how the prisons congregate people in one space who have done some sort of crime, and making a parallel to special ed, where they're concentrating students with special ed needs in one place.
Right. And and I'm kind of assuming here, but I would think that this is the kind of place, our social structure was strong enough to basically handle that. So I'll say.
I wasn't quite clear. The social structure in the schools is strong enough to handle that in that situation?
Not in the schools. By the time kids got to me, they had failed in 3 places, 3 school things. So I got the toughest of the tough.
Okay. Oh, so you got the students that came to you had already failed in at least 3 places, and so you were dealing with the toughest of the tough.
Right.
The really hard case, difficult case people, right. Students.
Yes, and I was quite proud that working with an excellent team and learning skills of de-escalation and listening and things like that. By the end of the year, we made, a much more functional mini society.
Mm-hmm. So you take pride in that you and the team that you worked with, you're able to create a functioning society with kind of the toughest of the toughs.
Right. And what that taught me is that human beings long for a just civilization.
Mm-hmm. So there was sort of a learning that comes from that, is that people long for sort of a just community and civilization, that there's it's just like an insight you had, that they don't want like chaos and whatever. They want like to live in a just system for everyone.
Right. And I had to deal with a lot of physical attacks. And what we used was a nonviolent de-escalation system that used a lot of engaging and talking. But then if they did attack physically, we used non-pain holds and things like that just to keep people safe till we could talk to them again.
So the methodology you used was to use like non-violent sort of techniques to deal with problem, or kind of, yeah.
So non-hurtful physical techniques, and then engage in dialogue.
Okay, so the methodology was to use non-hurtful kind of physical techniques to sort of contain any kind of violence, and then also use dialogue sort of to address any issues.
Right. And I think the key to that was engaging with the students on the front end.
Mm-hmm. So the key to being successful in that is to, in the very beginning, have engage the students in dialogue, or have ways. So you're not waiting for the violence to happen. You're already engaging to begin with, engaging them. And then if something happens, then you use minimal force, and then you also bring it into dialogue then. Right.
Thank you. I feel fully heard.
Okay. Let's speak to Jyoti then.
Hi.
Hey. I think in terms of prisons, I imagine, a prison is being sort of an empathy training center, that instead of it being about, punitive, retribution, punishment, violence, that like Bill is saying, you can create a whole environment that's really about an empathy training center, in a sense.
So are you saying that you'd like prisons to
That's
be?
what I would like. That's the vision. Yeah, exactly. That would be the sort of the vision. Uh-huh.
You have a vision of perhaps being able to change this prison system so that it becomes a community of empathy, of safety, and healthy community.
And that when people come out, they're actually highly skilled empathy facilitators and trainers, right? It's like, hey, they can go out there and sort of spread the message.
So your vision that the prisons could be a training ground for skillful peacemakers in the world.
Yeah. And then there's also the issue of, even up front before that, is that when we have a society that, as Carolina mentions, has a lack of, I would say it's an unempathic society to begin with, or low empathy, that, that needs to be addressed too. I had interviewed one of the people who was the founder of Cut 50, and she had sort of studied talked with people who had been committed murder or killed someone, and she said, each of them had a childhood, a whole history that led to that moment. You know, in short, they had an unempathic history, you know, family, society that was sort of unempathic to them and their needs. So, so there's even causes before any kind of a crime happens that the society has a responsibility for that lack of a culture of empathy.
So you're looking at both both the prison experience and how the prison experience gets created by a long-term exposure to culture, society, life experience that's devoid of empathy.
Yeah, and so the question is, like, how do we address that? And so kind of doing these empathy circles is one, you know, way, and sort of the social political activism that we're trying to do with the empathy tent is, you know, how do we really create a dialogue about this and have some sort of social action to say, hey, we're not just going to be talking about this, we're going to go out and kind of have some social action that gets people's attention around these issues.
So I hear a lot of deep care about this dilemma and all of this suffering that's happening, and that you're really committed to putting action to address these things that you care so deeply about, with the politics, with going to do these events and everything.
Yeah. So I'm sort of imagining an Occupy Empathy, where we set up our empathy tent out in public spaces, and we say, you know, we're here, we want, you know, we sort of, you know, we call for empathy, you know, a more empathic society, and we're not leaving, you know, and then kind of bring people into it, and maybe do it at the state capitals, where we say we want legislators to take part in empathy circles, and, you know, some kind of a social action around this that's really built around empathy and not just protest. Yeah, we're all pissed off, but that we actually have a, you know, kind of this empathic social action. How to really do that is kind of the question. It's a thin needle to, you know, it's like threading the needle. It's so easy to get off into anger and this and that. And empathy is, you know, an empathic approach is it's going to be a little, it takes some real skill or something to kind of do something like this.
I'm hearing that you've put a lot of consideration into ways, strategies to manifest and bring this awareness and education to our society, and that you also you notice that it takes a lot of intention and focus to keep
kind of on an empathic path.
Right.
It's like being on an empathic path is difficult. Yeah.
Yeah, it's difficult, and it's easy to get distracted, and you need to continually stay focused on just staying with empathy.
Yeah. Yep. I feel fully heard. Thank you.
Mm-hmm. So, do you go by William or Bill?
Bill's fine.
Okay. I heard that you created, when you're talking about your experience with these special needs people, that you created over and over and over, you created safety. And with the nonviolent interventions with attacks and engagement, connection, that they were able to develop a new experience of being safe finally.
So you were reflecting on what I'd said about creating a adaptive social milieu in the classroom, and that it was effective. So you were reflecting that.
Yeah, the thing that really impressed me was imagining these people coming in with probably, you know, a lot of trauma and low skill level, and then encountering someone who repeatedly created safety by not reacting in kind, by demonstrating over and over empathy and keeping them safe and not engaging in retribution. So that created, over time, created a safe, a sense of safety that they could trust you, trust the environment.
So you, again, reflecting upon what I was describing in the classroom, is that there was enough safety and not retribution, and then engaging in pro-social behaviors that you could create a mini functional class.
Right, and that the students could over time learn to trust, which I'm imagining was something that wasn't something they came with. I'm imagining most of them came with a huge lack of trust in their own safety, and that they were able to develop that and be able to have a biological, neurological experience of what it was like to be safe. Yeah, so that. Mm-hmm.
So the students that came with a lot of issues about safety, and they were traumatized and experiencing post-traumatic stress syndrome, and then by being consistent and just creating safety and dialogue, that they could benefit.
Yeah, they could come to a whole new experience. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So they were able to perceive the world in a more adaptive and pro-social way.
Yes. And I'm imagining that was just being able to experience an environment day after day that was safe, opened up a lot of more potential, and they could move forward from there. Because if you don't have safety to start off, you're kind of stuck.
Yes. But creating that area of safety, or that atmosphere of safety, was crucial to making them feel safe enough to explore other areas, new areas.
Right. So they could grow. Right.
So they could grow. Yes.
Yeah, I can heard.
Okay. All right. I'll talk to Carolina.
Okay, I'm listening.
So, first of all, I appreciated, I think, Jyoti, and then you said Paramiyoti, so if I'm saying it wrong. I express my appreciation for how well she was listening, and how she, because a lot of people, don't. So
first, you appreciate how Paramiyoti listened to you, to all of us, how well he hear what we are saying. You appreciate that,
right?
And you wanted to express your appreciation,
right? And now I'm going to take a little time to describe what I consider one of the high points of my career. And
so now you want to focus on a very important moment of your career.
Right.
Is that correct?
Yes, yes. I was the trainer, by the way, for people watching online, if you wanted to see what I was trained in, it's called CPI, or Crisis Prevention Institute, which you can look online.
So you were trained by a group called CPR, or?
CPI.
CPI.
Yeah. Crisis Prevention.
Crisis Prevention
Institute.
Prevention Institute. Mm-hmm. Okay.
And so when I was the person, when there was a particularly difficult or violent student, I was the person that they called. to intervene. And
so your job was to intervene when there was a student who was particularly difficult in his behavior and violent, as I understand you.
right. And so what I would do is, and what people don't see, is that the intervention is occurring over time. What we see when we see the gunman or we see the violent, we see one moment. But actually there's a whole life that goes behind that moment.
So you're saying that we have kind of wrong sense of what's happening because we see just one moment of committing a crime or making any form of violence, when actually it's a long, very long story, a whole life story that that led to this moment of crime or violence.
Right. So my job, like in this one particular student, I may have to, continue later. He came in, very large kid, African American, who was a wonderfully gifted communicator.
So you want to talk about a student, Afro-American student, who was very well gifted in communication skills. He was
right,
very good in talking.
Right. So as the person to avoid consequences, that's job number one for me. What I wanted to do was to engage him in his strength as much as possible to build a relationship.
So first job in your work is to build a communication relation with the student with whom you work.
Correct. And several times I was able to intervene and to talk to him. And he actually showed, was grateful for my intervention.
And you have few opportunities to talk to this guy, to the student, and you discovered that he was actually very grateful for this opportunity to talk to you and to exchange the thoughts, the ideas, whatever it was. Okay.
Right. And that my time is up. Oops, sorry. And we established a relationship, and I'll stop there. And thank you. I feel very heard.
Thank you. Well, okay, I have to choose. Yeah, to close the circle, I will choose Edwin.
Okay, listening.
So yeah, I don't know much about restorative practice. I'm trying to learn about it, but I believe it's the way to resolve most of the problems we face.
You don't know much about the restorative practices, but you have a belief that that is really a way we can address the problems that we're facing.
Yeah, and I see a particular problem we have in executing this restorative practice and practicing actually restorative cycles or empathy dialogues or whatever we want to do to make our society more equal or just.
So you're seeing kind of one problem area for doing this these restorative practices.
What Bill just mentioned is time. Time. I was talking about it in former our call. We were talking about individualism and collective society, and I mentioned about time. And now I feel the need to to come back to this problem of time. Restorative practice needs time.
Mm. Yeah, so the one point that is kind of the problem area is that it's time consuming. If you want to do a restorative practice, it takes time, and
Yeah.
it's very important to have that time.
And well, Bill, on his example, shows that that talking and also reflecting and sometimes staying aside with your own thoughts, thinking, digesting what you just heard, meeting again, talking again, disagree, agree, it all costs a lot of time.
So it's like Bill is an example, like with him and his students, he talked to the person and had a dialogue, developed a relationship. And so that's an example, and all that just takes a lot of time to do it, and maybe some concern that there's a lack of time. People just don't have that sense of time.
Yeah, and when we talk about crime, punishing, or instead of that, creating a restorative practice, we usually talk about a person who commit crime or violence and the victim. We don't see as a participant the whole community or the society, which should be included in this practice.
So you're kind of saying like how we look at the problem, like if there's a crime, there's a person, a victim, and then a perpetrator, or a person who did the crime, a person who was affected by the crime, and that's all that we're seeing. We don't see how the whole society is sort of affected by that.
Well, for example, if somebody, let's see, was killed on the street, it's not only about the murderer and the victim, it's also about the society and creating a fear among the people. Okay.
Yeah.
Feeling unsafety. That's just a simple example of that.
Yeah, an example of how the society is affected is if someone is killed or murdered, then everyone else is affected by it because they have then fear. It kind of changes the way that they see their environment, and everybody has that fear. So everyone's really affected. It's not just there. Yeah.
So I saw time is up. So there are more than just two participants of this relation of, let's say, crime and punishment. The whole society should be, or community, or for example, local community, should be involved in the restorative practice, and it needs time. And the time, as a key, is something that is ignored in our society. We have no time for it, and that's why we choose violent form of solving problems. Incarceration, massive incarceration, is violent form of solving problems.
So this restorative process really takes a lot. There's some principles that it takes, and one of the things that takes time, and the current approach is just, we don't have time, we're just going to use violence to solve the problem. And so that's one part. And the other part, and the other part is that the society, everyone is involved. We need to have everyone involved in any kind of a thing that happens, and people feel like they don't have time maybe for it. So these are just some problems that maybe inhibit a more restorative approach.
Yeah, so wrapping up, the way our society, our civilization, our culture is organized create the situation when we don't have time for restorative practice and empathy dialogue, and we choose violent, kind of full of forcing methods of resolving problem. It's a war, it's a prison system and justice system. They are all violent systems.
Hmm. So the society is not using sort of restorative practices because it just doesn't feel like it has time for it, and it just, so therefore it uses violence, war, prison. All these approaches are violent approaches instead of an empathic approach, which does take time, and everybody's got to be involved in it.
Yeah, I fully
Okay.
heard.
Mhm.
Thank you.
Yeah. Then I'll speak to Jyoti. Yeah, that's what's being said, you know, the tone, the ideas, it resonates with me. That's what I see as well. The whole issue of having time, you know, it takes time, it takes the community to be involved. All that resonates with me. I see that as well.
So this is highlighting something that you've contemplated before, and you agree that there's a time element and an agreement amongst all of us that we don't have time to participate in our own communities.
Yeah, and then it's like my question then is, what can we do? You know, how might we address this problem to, you know, how do we bring more restorative, what I would call restorative empathy practices? To be clear, because when we say restorative, it's like, what are we restoring? Are we restoring the status quo, or what are we restoring? So I don't like the term just restorative, because it's unclear what it is we're restoring. So I like restorative empathy to have, because we want an empathic relationship where everyone feels heard. So for me, it's a bit more specific what it is we're trying to restore. So it's a restorative empathy practice.
So you've given some thought to the term used of restorative circles, and the term restorative empathy seems to describe more clearly an effective way to get a shift in the culture.
Yeah. Because we're being clear what we're restoring. Are we just restoring the status quo? Are we restoring, you know, what are we restoring? So I would like a clear sense of what it is we're restoring and be more articulate. And for me, we're trying to restore an empathic, I don't know, culture of empathy, restore an empathic connection.
So you like the clarity about what you're actually not just restoring, but also it's like what you're trying to create.
Yeah.
Restoration is a creating of something that really, what I'm hearing is that what you're getting at is that not really restoring something, it's creating something that's not even there.
Yeah, that's the problem. The problem is, how are we restoring something if we're just restoring the status quo? We're not really restoring a culture of empathy per se. So in a sense, we've got to go and have we got to create this, you know, this culture to begin with, you know, to yeah. So it's like, how do we create this culture so that when there's a break in it, that then we restore that empathic connection between people.
So there's several stages. It's like, first stage is how do you just even begin to create a new culture, and then how do you create systems and the consciousness and the skills to restore what you've created when it's not working.
Yeah.
Is that it?
Yeah. So we're wanting to restore. Yeah. So we got to create that culture. I guess one of the practices is the empathy circle. You know, this is time consuming. We're going to have spent 2 hours, you know, talking about this. But like Bill says, you know, you got to practice. And it takes time to sort of practice this. And I do feel that with the empathy circle, if we can spread it and get more people involved in it and make it easy to sort of take part, we're sort of taking some baby steps for building this culture. It's like it's an easier step. You know, it's something that anybody can kind of learn pretty quickly as a first step.
So I think I'm hearing you're feeling hopeful about making it easy for people as an entry point to begin the process of creating an empathy, culture of empathy.
And that we have, we're doing the facilitation training, and then we want to do some activism where we actually set up the empathy tent and do an Occupy Empathy. I imagine like demonstrations, like right now at demonstrations, everybody goes and said, we're mad, or it has a sign. But what if we did a demonstration where everybody's doing an empathy circle? We have like, you got, 5,000 people all doing an empathy circle out on the street or whatever, and say, well, we want a more empathic society, and we're doing it. You know what I mean? And then they're all, for half a day, they're just, at the state capitol or at the, in Washington, D.C., just doing empathy circles, something like that.
So you're imagining this radical action of creating empathy circles right in the environments where in the past, all you've seen is people emotionally using their emotional bodies to
anger and stuff,
to be against something, but instead the radical action of creating these empathy circles as a really powerful way to immediately make the change.
Yeah, it's right. You're kind of living the change too, right? Yeah, that's right. That's so. Yeah, those are some ideas, and I think that what we're doing here is we're creating videos for it. After this meeting, we've got the training that we're developing. So I see this all as part of building the steps, for moving towards that culture of empathy.
So you're seeing that all of this investment and, intention and practice as building a foundation to, in very short time, actually see a manifestation of people living, actually spreading it and demonstrating what it is.
Yeah, and like Carolina had mentioned, Dominic Barter, he used his restorative empathy circles. This is it, right? This is the core of it. The restorative empathy circle is just people, the people who are involved in some kind of a conflict, and the community affected by it all coming together and doing empathic listening, just like this. So this is actually the first step to a restorative circle process, but that, for example, that Dominic Barter does.
So you're explaining that what we're doing right here is the core of restorative circles.
Yeah, I feel heard. Thank you. I think we have time for one more round. You'll be the closing round.
Okay. Well, interacting with you, I'll talk to you, Edwin.
Okay.
I feel inspired to hear your thoughts and ideas, and I don't know, since a little bit of a nuance of a shift in my understanding in this last round kind of happened for me, because I could, I've heard before, be the change you want to see in the world, and yeah, that's right, that's correct, but I don't know, that's, I just think I've heard it at a deeper place right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I saw a way to join with other people to go out and do it with.
Okay, you've heard this idea, be the change, but it seemed like it was more of a superficial sort of understanding of that. And now with what we were talking about here, kind of doing the empathy circles, the empathic listening, that it kind of connected more with, be the change, being empathic, and that it's also how to do it together with others too.
Yeah, and I think that there's a part of me personally that doesn't join in very much, and I think a piece of this is a bit of a understanding that it's not something you do alone. This happens in community. And, you know, I can try to give empathy, but if I'm not in a circle where it's coming to me and it's not shared, it's like I'm trying to do a new system in an old way.
You're saying that you're not a joiner and that you do listening, but that you're saying the part where in a circle, you're also being heard too. You're not just doing the listening, and it's like a whole cycle or of listening and being heard too. And that's sort of a new way. There's sort of an old way and a new way that you have.
Yeah, it's like rather than disconnecting, it's like I find myself wanting to connect. I've grown up in the same, you know, culture of violence and mistrust that we all rub up against and are steeped in. And so I, for many years, withdrew in a really drastic way. And so at the same time, I gathered some knowledge and understanding about what I was needing and realized what everybody was needing. So I would give empathy and listen, but I was always kind of in the teaching role. And there was a certain point that there was only certain capacity, but in being within a group, I see it wouldn't be just about me. It would be just about my community.
Okay, so you're looking at, you're saying that the society, you're seeing the violence and within the society, and your way of dealing with it was to withdraw. But then you did start learning some empathy skills, and then you started listening to others. And it sounds like you weren't, it was more of a teaching sort of approach in terms of listening and teaching, and that you're seeing that you're having a bit of a shift of awareness about the community aspect of it, that you're like part of a community, and that it's, so you're kind of just having different little insights about the quality and the nature of a more empathic community.
Yeah, and I think I'm also rethinking, just kind of trying to contemplate how I could have more connection in communities where I got some of my needs met as well, instead of just taking care of other people.
Yeah, so you'd kind of withdrawn, but then you did try to take care of other people's needs, and how can you get your needs addressed too in a community?
Yeah.
And kind of, so just kind of sitting with that question, so a bit of a, how can you do that? And it sounds like you do have a sense of wanting connection too. You know, having withdrawn, you do want to have a sense of connection with people.
Right, and I want a sense of connection with people and a certain quality of connection. I guess I have some standards.
Yeah, so you want a sense of connection, but there's a certain quality of connection, a sort of standard, and you're kind of looking at what those standards are and how to have that type of connection.
Yeah, I think that, you know, when I found empathy, I finally realized that this is what I've been looking for my whole life. You know, as a kid, I just withdrew and was silent. Nobody really understood why I was silent, but it was because I needed empathy.
Yeah, so it sounds like the way you dealt with things is you just withdrew and people didn't really understand it. And now you're sort of saying, oh, you really were wanting empathy. Is that, and so you're really seeing the value of empathy and nurturing that.
Yeah, it's really big. It's really. And so when you talk about like just setting up empathy circles in places, you know, public places, that all relates back to my own personal evolution and process, and was like, oh wow, this is like being a change, being.
Oh,
Mhm.
So being the change is doing empathy in public places. It kind of relates to that, that instead of withdrawing, you're out in public and being empathic with others. And that is what the change is.
Yeah, and being in these groups where there's safety, where the new culture is alive, living, present. Now, it's all now. It's all
Uh-huh.
in now.
Oh, uh-huh. Yeah, it's like we're in the now. Right now, we're listening to each other. We're being present with each other. We're hearing each other. We're speaking. And it's in the present. It's not something way off in the future, or maybe
Right.
unattainable or something.
Right. We're just living it. And by living it, teaching it instead of teaching it. We're living it, and that teaches it.
So just doing what we're doing is living the empathy, and then we're learning just by doing it.
And others learn by being around it and watching it and then being brought in and participating.
So it's kind of comparing the different teaching styles. One is more didactic teaching. The other one is sort of by living it and doing it. People learn sort of through the experience of it.
Yeah, so that's why I was very inspired by your vision of just bringing it out there and living it with everyone.
And feeling inspired by the vision of just going out there doing those demonstrations and living it. And yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I think that was the time.